So hello everyone, I'm Ruth. I'm the Acting Director at Touring currently. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where I'm currently. I'm in Meanjin, Brisbane, on Yagara and Turrbal country. Normally I'm up in the Toowoomba area. I'll extend my acknowledgement to the traditional owners in areas where each of you are coming from, which might also be in Meanjin. Um, I know we had people from Cairns who were going to join us. So anyone joining us later online for the on-demand, I extend acknowledgement to the traditional owners where you are as well. Pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise there's been generations of creativity and culture on the lands right across the state. So before I start, a little bit of housekeeping to let you know that we are recording the session tonight, and then it will be mastered and shared on the Q-Touring website. So there may be some people joining for the on-demand viewing at a later time. Also suggest during the presentation part, you might mute your mics. And if you have any issues with bandwidth or cameras, feel free to turn your camera off during the presentation at least anyway, but it's lovely to see your faces. Several of you or several of the registrants provided some pre-session questions which have been passed on to Toma, and I'll be also monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions that come up during the session, feel free to pop them in there. So round 3 of the the Queensland Touring Fund is about to open. So it's an ideal time to hear about the details of the fund. And so you can organise what you're doing with your work and have it tour around Queensland in 27. So it's my very great pleasure to welcome our special guest, who's the Director of the Grants Assurance Team at Arts Queensland. Please welcome Toma Dim. Thanks for joining us, Toma.
Thank you very much for having me. So yeah, I'm the Director of the Grants Assurance Team. I look after all the contestable grant programs at Arts Queensland. And I used to be the Touring Queensland Fund Manager when I was a littler person. And I also have a background in touring in the UK. And then I moved to Australia to run the what used to be Arts Council Queensland or Queensland Arts Council, the schools touring program, with a lovely 50-year lineage behind that, which unfortunately is no longer with us, but we've got different alternatives. But so touring is a deep passion of mine, and I come from rural New South Wales, so I also totally get it from the audience point of view about why it's so important to have amazing companies with making amazing art going out to regional Queensland. So yeah, you have me coming and going on touring. So I'm just going to share my presentation now. It's PowerPointy, but hopefully I will be able to modulate my voice and stop you from falling asleep after a hard day at work. All right. So, as I said, my name's Toma Dim. I'm the Director of the Grants Assurance Team at Arts Queensland. And I'd also like to extend my respect and acknowledgement of the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting. I'm also here in Meanjin, Brisbane, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations people who may be joining us virtually later or viewing this presentation at a later date. So what am I going to talk about today about the Touring Queensland Fund? Very quickly, I'll take you through the decision-making process for our funds, because I think it just gives a useful context about the things that I'm going to talk about later. I'll take a look at eligibility and eligible costs under the Touring Queensland Fund, spend a bit of time with the assessment criteria and the application form. We'll also have a look at some budgets and give you a bit of a run through with snips out of the actual application form, take you through the application tips, and then finish off with the timelines for Arts Queensland's next round of the Touring Queensland Fund. So, decision making. How does it all happen? Well, once you've submitted your application, the assessment and the approval process starts taking place. So first of all, Arts Queensland looks at your application and determines whether or not it's eligible. So that looks at the eligibility criteria in the fund. If you are eligible, then your application will be passed to be assessed by an independent panel of expert peer assessors. So peer assessors are independent artists and arts workers who represent the diversity of Queensland's communities, including regional experience, and we also have representation from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and peers who identify as deaf or as a person with disability. So each peer assessor individually assesses each application against the assessment criteria. Then peers come together as a panel for moderation, and this is chaired by Arts Queensland staff. And during the moderation, peers discuss their assessments and make funding recommendations as a panel. So making funding recommendations is a complex process. Peers assessors will also aim for balance and diversity across art forms, applicant types, and the different types of groups that might benefit, and also the geographical location of applicants or touring activities. So sometimes when we've got an equally good, two equally good applications, if we've already funded lots of applications to go up the coast, then the application that's going west might get a bump over the application that's going up the coast if they're equally, if all other considerations are equal, and vice versa. Sometimes we get a lot of stuff going out west and not a lot of stuff going up the coast. So that's, I guess, the hardest bit for you guys as applicants, is you don't know who else is applying. All you can do is do the very, very best that you can with your application. But sometimes peers do have to make those tough decisions, and it is public money, so they are looking at value for the whole of Queensland. So then they make their recommendations to the delegate. So they are not the people approving your funding. They're the people making the recommendations to our Director General of the Department of Education, and they make the decisions on funding. Once your application's been approved by the DG, then we'll notify applicants of the outcome of their applications. And we usually do this via email. Outcomes will also be published on the Arts Queensland website once the Minister announces the outcome through a media release. So you'll generally find out before the rest of the public will. Okay. So now on to the Touring Fund proper. Touring Queensland Fund is focused on supporting regional communities' access to high quality arts and cultural products, events and experiences, including music gigs. It's a key initiative of the Queensland Government and supports delivery of Queensland's Time to Shine, which is the whole of government 10-year strategy for arts and culture. And it supports one of its key priorities, which is arts for all Queenslanders. So under the fund, you can apply for up to $100,000, and that's to support a single tour of any length or a program of tours that are taking place over a period no longer than 12 months. So one tour for any length of time, because if you're in the visual arts world, one tour can often take 3 years, but most of our performing arts touring is a lot quicker than that. And I'm kind of assuming today that I'm speaking to a performing arts audience, so I've tailored my presentation accordingly. If anybody is interested in touring things that aren't performing arts, please don't hesitate to get into contact with us if you'd like a bit more context for your particular art form. Under the Touring Queensland Fund, you can also apply for up to an additional $10,000 for costs that are related to the inclusion and participation of people with disability or who are deaf. I'll talk about this a bit more in a later slide. Now, tours can be for any art form for which Arts Queensland has responsibility. So that includes visual arts, craft and design, and cultural heritage, but performing arts, including contemporary and classical music, dance, circus, theatre, as well as writing. And in other slides, I'll talk about a bit more about the different types of tours that you might do. So you can read the fund objectives at your own time, But what I really wanted to emphasise was that the Touring Queensland Fund will support the touring of Brisbane-based artists and companies to regional Queensland, but it also supports tours of regionally based artists and companies to Brisbane and other Queensland regions. You can also tour within a region as well as between regions. And we also support the touring into schools, and that can be for workshops or performances. The tour that you put forward for Arts Queensland funding can have interstate dates. It doesn't have to just be in Queensland. However, Arts Queensland funding won't support the interstate component. It'll just support the Touring Queensland, the Queensland component, but it may make more sense for you to present the whole tour with the whole budget, especially if there's income coming from other sources interstate. In the Touring Queensland Fund, you can apply as an individual, as a group, or an organisation, or as a consortium of presenters and venues. You're also able to be auspiced if you need support to manage the obligations of your funding agreement. And again, any questions, you can talk to us in a bit more detail. So let's first quickly take a look at the eligibility criteria. We absolutely know that applications take a lot of effort. So it's best to find out if you're eligible to apply before you commit too much time to an application. The Touring Queensland guidelines on the website have a full list of eligibility criteria, and there's also some additional explanation of some eligibility criteria in the FAQs. So I encourage you to read both of those documents before you apply or before you talk to Arts Queensland, just so that you've got as much information as you can before you speak to us. So there are some key eligibility criteria across all Arts Queensland funds, and that's generally that you must be based in Queensland, you must have all of the reporting that's due to Arts Queensland up to date, you mustn't owe us any money, and you need to submit all the compulsory support material for your funding program. I've pulled out some of the other key eligibility criteria that are particular to the Touring Queensland Fund, for example, the 3 locations being tour ready and the funding percentage and interest, and I'll speak about those in the next slide. But I really wanted to emphasise that if you have any concerns about whether you meet any of the eligibility criteria, that you speak to Arts Queensland as soon as possible to discuss your application. We really don't want you putting effort in if it's not going to be the right fund for you. All right, so let's have a look at some of those eligibility criteria. So first and foremost, if you're applying to the fund, you need to be applying for a tour. So what is a tour? So in the context of the Touring Queensland Fund, a tour means the same performance, exhibition or activity happening in sequence over a cohesive period of time in more than 3 external communities. So for the purposes of this fund, you must have at least 3 locations other than the touring party's home location to be considered for a tour. If you're wanting to do things in just 2 locations, then the Queensland Arts Project Fund also will support limited touring costs. So you can look for things there. But really, for us, if you're going on a tour, you're going to at least 3 places. So the fund, as I said, will support all different types of tours, and our FAQs give you some more details. What I'd say in terms of choosing the structure of your tour is that it should make sense for you, your project and your audiences. So it's not a one size fits all. You may be doing a linear tour, i.e. one location after another, or it might be a hub and spoke model where you travel out and return to a central base. So Arts Queensland, as I said, will fund a single tour of any length or a program of tours over a year. So for example, a program of tours might be a series of 3 live music tours to the same circuit over a year, or, for example, a consortium of venues applying to support 3 different contemporary dance tours to their circuit over the course of a year. Again, if you've got any questions, please do talk to us. The Touring Queensland Fund will also support something that's kind of, I guess, known at the moment as slow touring. And that's where parts or all of a touring party spend longer periods in community to deliver activities that have a focus on deeper community engagement and participation. But again, in that sense of touring, they're taking that model and they're doing that slow touring in at least 3 different locations. We'll also support something called, which is, I guess, generally known as concept touring. And that's where the idea or the process or work travels or tours, but a full touring party doesn't. So, for example, you're producing a community-based work, and that work is going to be produced and delivered and cast by the community in which the presentation will take place. But then the work travels to another community. So the people in that instance who are consistent across it might be the artistic leadership team who are going to be working in each of those communities to deliver stuff with community. So it's the idea that's touring more than the show itself. Hopefully that makes sense. So now that we've covered touring, what do we mean by a location? 3 different locations. Well, locations in if you're going to different local government areas, each local government area would count as a separate location. But also different towns in the same LGA would count as separate locations. For example, Boona and Bow Desert in the Scenic Rim Regional Council, or Charleville and Augathella in the Merway Shire Council. Different suburbs in the same city do not count as different locations. So a tour of schools performances going into 8 schools in 3 different suburbs in Cairns would still only be able to be counted as one location, even though the schools and the suburbs are different. It's a touring fund. We're paying you to travel around. If you're not traveling around, then it's really not a tour. I guess a good test, if you're thinking about, oh, well, are these different communities, are these different locations, is how would you describe where you lived to somebody who lived out of state? Would you say that you lived in Thuringowa, or would you say you lived in Townsville? Would you say, oh, I'm from Aspley, or would you say, well, I'm from Brisbane? So think about that. I think that's a really, I guess, a common sense test when you're thinking about what makes a different location. So you need to have 3 locations that aren't your home location. So what do we mean by home location? Well, for the purposes of the Touring Queensland Fund, we use the location of the touring party as the home location. Basically, the Touring Fund won't pay you for activities where you live. We use the touring party's location rather than the applicant, because the applicant could be the producer and live in a different town. For example, a Brisbane-based promoter is the applicant and is touring a band from Townsville. It wouldn't make sense for public money to be spent on a Townsville gig, as the Townsville band doesn't have to travel there. But it would make sense for the fund to support that Townsville band to tour to Brisbane. So what happens if your touring party comes from different places? What's their home location? Well, if most of the touring party is from the same location, you would count this location as the home location, and it couldn't count as a touring location. So using our previous example, if 3 of the band members are from Townsville and 1 is from Cairns, count Townsville as the home location, and Cairns can be a touring location. If the individuals in the touring party are all from different locations and the tour will visit each of these locations, you could count them all as touring locations in counting them all against your 3 touring locations. But in both the instance of the Townsville Cairns and the multiple different locations, the fund will only support accommodation and travel costs for your touring party in the towns where they do not live. So we don't fund you to do stuff where you live. So we fund tour ready work. What do we mean by tour ready? And this, I guess, came up in a little bit in one of the questions that was posed in advance. So by tour ready, we mean performing arts productions or visual arts exhibitions that are artistically completed and packaged and ready for public presentation without the need for additional development or significant remounting costs. Basically, the assessors need to be able to assess the artistic content that you'll be presenting, which they can't do if the work's not made yet. And it will usually make most financial sense to tour a show or an exhibition following on from a starting location or that's had a fairly recent presentation, because then you've got costumes, sets, things like that. So from a financial point of view, we want things to be tour ready. Arts Queensland absolutely acknowledges that a show previously presented may need a rehearsal period ahead of touring if there's been a break. And you can include the rehearsal and a reasonable amount of remount costs in your budget. But what you can't do is you can't put Arts Queensland's funding against it. So it would need to be covered by, I guess, the fees, the presentation fees, or your box office. I'm going to talk a little bit more about eligible costs in our next slide. So another, just very quickly, what is a presenter? Well, sometimes I might say venues during this presentation, sometimes I might say presenter, but the presenter is really the person that is, I guess, hosting your performance for the community. So sometimes that's a physical venue, sometimes it's a local organisation or the local council, something like that. So presenter and venue can be kind of used interchangeably in this speech in case I'm accidentally confusing anybody. So what counts as 50% or less tour costs? One of our eligibility criteria is that we'll only fund 50% of the cost of a tour. You can count in kind as part of your 50%, but your application will be more competitive if there's cash investment from fees or ticket sales or other funders or sponsors. So the budget will help you understand what percentage of Arts Queensland of your project you're asking for Arts Queensland and what what is coming from outside, and that probably will make a little bit more sense when we do the budgets later. So another eligibility criteria is that we're asking you to have 75% of your tour presenters, venues, committed when you apply, committed or interested when you apply. So this doesn't have to be a contract or a booking form. An email confirmation is fine, and it can absolutely be contingent on you getting the funding for this tour. But what we are looking for, and what the peers are looking for, is a fair degree of certainty that all the venues that you say in your tour are going to be venues that you actually are able to perform at. In schools, for in-schools touring, it's slightly different. You still need to have that 75% interest, but we know that schools won't always commit to booking a tour that may not go ahead. So either you can have it as expressions of interest form, if you sort of do a mail out to schools saying who might want to book me for next year, or you can also, in the context of in-schools touring, you can provide evidence of previous historical bookings for your tour. So if you've been touring a school show for the last 2 years and you've always had 16 or more schools in at least 3 communities booking your show, then you can provide that as evidence that you'll have that 75% of the tour that you're proposing this time committed, because you've got a reasonably good expectation that you'll be able to achieve this again. But that's just for schools touring. If you're not good doing in-schools touring, then you still need to have that some sort of letter of evidence of interest and or confirmation from those locations. I'll take that later, I think, Jacob. And just a note on schools tours, if you're applying for a schools tour, you must also show how your activities support the Queensland curriculum, and you must have a child safety policy or framework in place as well. Don't forget the Touring Queensland Fund frequently asked questions page on the Arts Queensland website. It's a very useful resource and will answer a lot of these questions again if you need them. Okay, so ineligible and eligible costs. Basically, Arts Queensland will fund the components of your project that cost extra because you're touring, rather than the cost that you'd incur if you were presenting just in that place. So we fund artists and arts workers' fees while they're on tour, because we know that when you're on touring, you're having to pay travel time, not just performance time. But as I said before, we won't fund fees for rehearsals prior to the tour. Arts Queensland will also fund the costs of moving people around and moving the stuff around, plus any equipment that you might need to hire to do the tour. However, we don't fund the purchase of equipment. You can also ask Arts Queensland to contribute towards community engagements that you'll do on the tour. And of course, you can ask for up to $10,000 extra for disability-related access costs, just disability-related access costs, not any other sort of general access costs. If your disability access costs are higher than $10,000, that's fine. You can ask for access costs within that $100,000 envelope plus the $10,000, if that makes sense. So yeah, it can be more, but the total that you'll be able to get from Arts Queensland is only $110,000. So venue-related costs and marketing costs are not eligible for support under the Touring Queensland Fund. And as discussed in the previous slide, you can't ask for funding to deliver activity in your touring party's hometown. A note on travel costs. If your tour has interstate dates, you can ask for funding to travel either out of the state or back into the state, but not both. So I guess one leg of that journey coming out of the state is eligible, as we'll still count one leg of it as Queensland activity rather than interstate activity. And while we strongly recommend that you build contingency into either your individual costs or have a separate line in the budget for it, you can't put Arts Queensland funding against a line in the budget that is contingency. That again, you need to cover out of the cash that you've got from other sources. I think I'd really like to strongly emphasize that if it's not on the list of eligible costs, those green ones and the ones in the guidelines, then the cost isn't eligible. So you can include eligible costs in your budget, you just can't put Arts Queensland's funding towards them. And we've had a number of situations where people have included a lot of ineligible costs in their budget that we weren't able to move and shift into eligible costs, and therefore we can only offer them a reduced amount of funding, which doesn't make their tour make any sense. And again, if you've got any questions, please contact us in advance to see if your tour items will be eligible, your costs will be eligible. Can I just have a look at Jacob's question?
Yeah. Yeah, he says, can the other 50% of his tour costs be from out of state, or is this also Queensland based?
If you have a tour that's going into Queensland and into other parts of the state, it's the 50% of your income needs to be from a non-Arts Queensland source. We really don't care where it comes from, you know, within reason. No proceeds of crime, please. Or, so if you're being paid really well by your interstate people, and that will part fund your tour for all of your Queensland costs, then that's okay. But I would say there's a difference, I guess, between eligible and what makes a good application. So technically you would be eligible because you have 50% of your tour and your tour income would be coming from somewhere else. But when peers look at it and go and look at the totality of your budget, and it looks like Arts Queensland is paying for 100% of the Queensland tour, even though technically the budget is bigger than that, then you're probably not going to be very competitive. So again, there's this difference between eligible, which is a bit more technical, and what makes a compelling argument for support. Thanks, Jacob.
And just to clarify, he would still need 3 locations in Queensland.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Okay, that's all right. So, applying to the fund. Applications need to be made via Smarty Grants. If Smarty Grants, which is an online portal, grants portal, if Smarty Grants doesn't meet your access needs, please contact us as soon as possible because we can offer an alternative. We also wanted to let you know that applicants can choose to supply some support material and answers to some questions as audio or audio-visual files, if that's easier for you than writing. There's the ability to upload files to answer questions. You still need to answer all the same sort of information, but you can do it verbally rather than write it if that works for you. The Smarty Grants application form provides guidance to which questions or sets of questions and support material relate to which of the assessment criteria. They also have hints and tips. If you read the application instructions and the tips and hints, you'll find your application process much smoother. So when it comes to answering questions that require a text response, we do recommend copying the questions to a separate document and working on them offline. This will reduce the potential risk of you losing your work if any issues occur with Smarty Grants or any sort of connectivity issues that can sometimes be experienced. It's also much easier to spell check outside of Smarty Grants than inside of Smarty Grants, and Smarty Grants does not format either. So it can be just easier to work in Word and then copy it back into Smarty Grants when you're done. We also recommend regularly saving your application, for example, after every question or document upload. Please note that any questions that are marked with an asterisk are compulsory. If you don't answer these questions, you won't be able to submit the form. The form also uses skip logic depending on your answers. For example, you'll be asked slightly different responses and support material depending on what you're applying for example, access costs or for school touring. So if you download the PDF before you start, and then you start filling the application form in, you go, where are these questions I thought I had to answer? It's most likely as a result of skip logic. We do advise that you look through the whole application early in the process to allow yourself enough time to ensure that you can develop the documentation that you may need and to gather the support material that you need from presenters or partners. Okay, assessment criteria. Your application will need to demonstrate that your project delivers against all of the relevant assessment criteria included under the headings of high quality, strong impact, and sustainable value. These high-level areas, high quality, strong impact, sustainable value, are common to all Queensland Time to Shine funds, and a lot of the assessment criteria are very similar. So if you do work on one application, you'll probably find some of that information could be used in different applications if need be. So broadly speaking, and regardless of the fund, your application is really about articulating the value of your project and how your project meets the purpose of the fund. The application is also about giving confidence that the project will be well managed and has a very good chance of being delivered in the way that it's described in the application. It's really important that you back up any claims that you make with evidence and that you tell a consistent story. So I'm not going to go through the criteria, but I'm going to pose some questions that you should probably ask yourself and that will help you write and address these criteria. So why is the project important at this time and in this place? What evidence do you have that this project is wanted or needed by the communities that you intend to visit? What does success look like to you, and how will you measure it? Will you be building a market for yourself and your artists, or for the art form, or both? How can you show that you have the right people internally to deliver your project and your goals? How will your partners and collaborators add value to what you do so that the project is more than the sum of its parts? What will the tour's legacy be, if any, for the artists involved or for the communities being visited? How are you making the most of Arts Queensland's funding? Is your tour structure and itinerary efficient and achievable? Have you got adequate time for planning and delivery? Does your itinerary provide enough time for breaks and safe working? Are your costs good value? When you're in a community, have you thought about what you can do while you're there that meets a need for that community or expands access to arts and cultural activities? So I'm going to talk more about budgets and risk management in future slides, but I wanted to just speak a little bit about the criteria as they relate to access funding and cultural competencies. I'm talking about them both together because I guess it's a similar mindset you would approach to both. So if you are requesting additional access funding, you will need to demonstrate that the funding requested is clearly aligned to the impact of the planned activity and to the targeted artists and or audiences. So it can't be for your business in general, it needs to be for the tour. And while we definitely believe that improving access is a good thing, this is public money, and Arts Queensland wants to make sure that applicants have given thorough consideration to their plans and not just tacked on a funding request for access support because it's available. So to do this, you need to consider how you can demonstrate that people with disability have been involved in developing the plans for the activities that you're seeking access support for. You need to be able to demonstrate that you've considered the specific needs of the artists or the audiences and how those needs are going to be met by the access support costs. If you're seeking funding to support audiences with disability, your marketing plans should show very clearly how those audiences will be targeted and engaged and supported. So I guess some of this is very similar to the idea of best practice around appropriate cultural competencies. Not every application is expected to be working with diverse groups, with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people or people with disability or the LGBTIQ community. But if you are, then you really need to have a good hard think about how you've involved that community in consultation and appropriate permissions. So if you are planning to work with Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander communities or artists or with Indigenous intellectual and cultural property, also known as ICIP, you should demonstrate that you've had respectful and meaningful consultation and that you have the appropriate permissions and support of elders that can speak for that community. Don't get a letter from an Aboriginal person in Brisbane saying what a great tour and a great show you have because you're going to 3 different communities in the Cape. That's not permission. There's not consultation with the people and the communities that you're delivering the activity in. It's essential to implement and adhere to First Nations protocols and to demonstrate the practical application of these in your budget. So if you're going to talk about, yes, you're going to do some welcome to countries, then make sure you've got something in your budget to pay for somebody to do a welcome to country where you're going. And these sort of, I guess, ideas of respectful and meaningful consultation and appropriate permissions is also true if you're planning to work with a particular culturally diverse community on your tour, or you're telling the stories of a community that's not your own. It's vital that you provide evidence of genuine relationship building and mutual interest in the project, such as letters of support or other expressions of collaboration. In these instances, this evidence will be compulsory support material, and if you don't provide it, you may not be assessed. And again, if you have any concerns about whether this is going to be a relevant thing for your project, please give us a call. If you're working in a culturally competent way, it means doing things with a group or community, not to them. A handy phrase that both the disability and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community use is nothing for us without us. So do think about how you've involved those communities early on in your project design. Okay. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper look at some of the compulsory support material. Not every single piece, but these were certainly bits that came up in the questions that were asked in advance for this session. So as I've said before, if you don't provide all the compulsory support material required, you won't be eligible for funding and you won't progress to assessment. Don't have all the hard work you've done on the rest of everything fail because you haven't put in the appropriate compulsory support material. I'm just going to focus on a few this evening. So we asked that people provide a marketing or an audience development plan. So what's the difference between a marketing and an audience development plan? And I'm sure Q-Touring can help you with this.
It absolutely can.
But in general, a marketing plan refers to activity that's focused on promoting an activity to generate sales or attendance, while an audience development plan is a bit more of a strategic document that focuses on building long-term collaborative relationships with existing and potential audiences. Applicants have the option of providing one or the other, as we recognise that a marketing plan is not necessarily appropriate for all activities funded through the Touring Queensland Fund. The level of detail in your marketing plan should be appropriate to the size and scale of your tour, the proportion of income that you need to generate through ticket sales, and the level of marketing support that you'll receive from presenting partners. So if you're self-presenting, you need to have a much more detailed marketing plan than if the venues that you're attending are going to take care of all of the marketing for you. An audience development plan might be more appropriate where the touring activity is focused on participation activities or slow touring, or where presenters are taking responsibility for attracting the attendees. An audience development plan would outline how you'll be communicating your activity to local stakeholders and communities, and would also include any actions to help connect with attendees and participants beyond the life of the project for future engagement. Even if presenters will be doing most of the marketing, you must still provide a marketing or audience development plan to demonstrate how you will support your presenters to promote your activity, as well as any independent marketing or promotion to your own networks or to raise your profile, or how you're going to be developing your audience. So it is an essential thing for everyone to do. Okay, evaluation plan. This scares people. But really, it doesn't have to be war and peace. A page will suffice, but it's really about what your goals are, what success looks like to you, and how you'll know if you've achieved it. Because really, that's what we're most interested in your outcome reporting, is did our funding help you achieve what you wanted to achieve? Because that's a great story for us as government. So if you tell us a little bit now about what you want to do, then that's, again, another case, another, I guess, string in your bow in making a case for funding. Look, if you give me this money, these are my goals and this is how I'm going to achieve them. So what I'm going to do now is maybe give you a couple of examples so you can see the connection, but really these need to be relevant to you and your activity. So don't just copy and paste these and go, well, that's my evaluation plan. They really need to be relevant to your needs as an artist or an organization and to the tour that you're doing. So one of your goals could be growing your audience compared with previous visits to a town. You will measure it by comparing the number of tickets you sell this time to the baseline of the 250 tickets that you sold on your last visit, based on box office reports from the host venue. So that's how you're going to measure it. Box office reports. Success will be a 10% increase on your previous visit. So that's, I guess, you would include all of that information in your marketing plan. My goal is to do this. This is how I'm going to measure it. And this is how I'm going to know if I've achieved success. Alternatively, a different goal could be to understand what motivates your regional audiences to attend so that you can tailor future touring product or invest in specific marketing channels. You might measure this by the responses to a survey that asks those sorts of questions. And success might look like a 15% response rate and some concrete insights that you can apply to your next tour. Alternatively, your goal might be about developing relationships with presenters in order to get return visits for your next tour, or increasing the skills and confidence of workshop participants. And all of those things are going to have a different measure and a different level of success. Okay, partner letters. We strongly recommend that a letter from your partner includes what they're supporting in the project, why they are supporting the project, and the value and nature of any financial or in-kind support. All partner letters or letters of support should have a name or contact information so they can be verified. If your letters of support are being provided by video, they still need to have this information, and we still need to know who the speaker is, who they're speaking on behalf of, and some contact information. CVs for key artists and arts workers. So it's very common for people to put a full artistic CV, but not to talk about how they've delivered any touring activity before. So we would suggest that the CVs or short bios that you give us highlight past relevant projects, roles and achievements, experience that directly relates to this project, because your bios are demonstrating capability, not just your history. So it is, yes, about your artistic credibility, but it's also about your practical capability. And different people within different parts of, some people are going to be the artists and some people are going to be the producers or the tour managers or the tour coordinators. So do give us information about any of those people that are going to be critical to demonstrating to those, to the assessors, that you're going to be able to deliver this project as planned.
And Toma, do you need to have confirmation that they're on board?
That's absolutely preferable. And I'd say it gets peers get more antsy about it the bigger the name is. So if you're promising you're touring, quite a famous or high profile person, then they're really going to want to see that person's on board with the project. But yes, quite often people just provide a little copy of emails saying, yes, if this project gets funded, I'm involved. And sometimes they're letters of support. Yeah. So I spoke in an earlier slide in a lot more detail about the 75% commitment and the difference in evidence for in-schools and other tours. But just to reiterate, it doesn't have to be a contract or a booking form. You can have emails, and it can be contingent on getting the funding to tour. And somebody asked me, why 75%? Why did you pick 75% Arts Queensland? Well, if you think about it, our eligibility requires you to have a minimum of 3 locations. So to achieve 75%, you'd need to have all 3 confirmed as a minimum, because otherwise 75% does not go well into 3. But a tour of 4 locations, 75% of that will be 3. So we're knowing that you've got confirmation that you will at least be able to meet the minimum criteria for the amount of locations that we have for you going off on tour. Risk management. So one of the questions in our application form relates to key risks and how they will be managed. So as I've said before, assessors want to be as confident as they can be that the project will be delivered as planned, that the application that they read and that they love and they think is great is going to be actually the project that's delivered. Risks will, of course, therefore be bespoke to your tour and your touring approach. But I can talk a little bit about some general approaches, but really your assessors will be looking at your tour and the risks on your tour. This is where I recommend, if you do use AI, that you use it as a template only and absolutely adapt it for your tour, because a generic risk assessment doesn't give assessors the confidence that you know what you're doing and that you're going to be able to manage those risks appropriately. So, financial risks. How will you ensure that you're achieving your project income and managing your costs? And how will you be able to do that through the life of the project? What will you do if project income decreases or costs increase or both? How are you going to be able to at least have some contingency or flexibility within the project delivery to make sure you can keep things on track? Health and safety. A tour that's going into venues that are not usually used for performances might need to have a bit more consideration of workplace health and safety than a tour that's going into managed venues. Another big thing to think about in touring is travel and mental health. So if your touring party is driving, how will you manage maximum working hours and safe driving, especially if there are long distances involved and you're on rural and remote roads? How are you going to keep in contact with the touring party? Rest periods built in. Are they doing something tricky physically, like circus, in which case you really need to make sure that, so your rigging and injuries and warm-ups and things like that are covered under your health and safety risk considerations. Weather. This is Queensland. Weather happens. But again, it's going to be bespoke to your tour. Are you going to remote communities that could get cut off in a flood? Or are you travelling around southeast Queensland on sort of nice paved roads on highways? Are you travelling in the rainy or storm season? Is your work happening out of doors? Think about these risks and how you're going to manage them and put that very clearly in your risk assessment. Operational risks. What's your backup for key pieces of kit while you're on tour? Or what are you going to do if touring party members get sick? Reputational risks. This is particularly relevant if you're working in schools or with young people, or if the subject matter of your tour is a bit contentious. How will you deal with complaints? How do you ensure appropriate safeguarding for children? But we're really keen to see, what is your plan B? If budgets blow out, or income drops, or funding doesn't eventuate, will you reduce activity, or locations, or staff, or all of the above? If you have a detailed risk management framework that sits sort of outside, and you've done it on a separate document, then you can attach it as a piece of support material and just reference the attachment in the question text so that you don't have to repeat it. However, if it doesn't outline the plan B, you need to make sure that that's included in the written or the video upload text. Having a plan B not only is good for you, but it also means that it becomes part of the approved application, because assessors have looked at your plan B and thought it was an appropriate plan B that they would be supportive of. So if the worst happens and you have to enact plan B, Arts Queensland is likely to be able to approve your variation pretty quickly because it's already been pre-approved by assessors. So that's, I guess, another reason to think about your plan B. Okay. Oh, now we're on the home stretch and talking about the money. So applications are strengthened by having transparent budgets that are clear and detailed and demonstrates how that they are aligned to achieving the project's goals. We strongly recommend that you do your budget as one of the first things in your application, because once you do the budget and you make the numbers work and the units work, then it's much easier to write your narrative. And you also know whether or not it's going to be able to work financially before you start down the path of writing all of the wonderful words about why we should fund you. I also can't recommend strongly enough that you read the instructions in the application form. The instructions there are designed to step you through filling in the budget. And if you do it in the order that the instructions tell you to do, then you will greatly reduce the chance that you'll have any issues with your budget. The majority of problems that we find when people can't balance their budgets is because they have ignored the instructions and just started putting things in, and that's where problems occur. Please call us as soon as possible if you don't understand those instructions or something isn't working in your budget. It's absolutely too late to try and fix a budget if you're calling us on the day that the application is due, and people do. And they generally don't get funded because the assessors go, this budget makes no sense. So budget information should be realistic. It should match your project description, your project plan, and your support material. For example, if you've got letters from partners with in-kind or financial contributions, it should be the same number in the letter as it is in your budget. You can include a reasonable amount of detail in the line item descriptions, such as how many days or weeks you're paying for and the rates that you're paying people. Having this level of detail also helps demonstrate that you're paying people appropriately, which is a really big concern for our peers. We also strongly recommend that you include current quotes for significant expenditure items in your supporting materials. You can also provide additional detail in the notes to budget section, or by uploading additional attachments that might give details about how you've arrived at income or expenditure projections. And again, it's to give assessors confidence that your income targets are achievable and that your cost estimates are robust, i.e. you're going to be able to deliver the project on the budget that you've provided. Once you've finished your application, double check that your narrative and your supporting material align with what's in your budget. Different figures throughout the application create questions in assessors' minds and really undercut your application's credibility. You have to provide the budget in the application form's layout. The budget has 4 sections, 2 expenditure sections, one just for general expenditure and one for access costs. There's also an income section and an in-kind section. Do not include in-kind in either the income or the expenditure sections. It has its own section, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. Before I move on to sort of a little bit of a run through on some snips coming out of an actual application budget, one of the questions put to me in this session was how to monetarily de-risk a production. Well, I think from the slides so far, there's quite a few examples of what you can do to de-risk. So as we've just talked about, having a way to monitor income and expenditure and having a mechanism to be able to make adjustments to the tour on a pre-approved basis on your plan B in a timely way, that will help de-risk the money side of your tour. Having 75% of your presenters confirmed at the point of application will also help you to de-risk. You've got a really good solid income base to be able to build from. Having a robust methodology for your income and expenditure helps to de-risk. Be conservative but reasonable in your audience projections and therefore your ticket income, if you have any, because it might be that you're getting fees from presenters, but if your ticket income is part of your income mix, then you need to do some investigation and some sense testing about your income projections. So talk to the venues that you're going to, or the communities or the towns or the local presenters about what sort of audiences that they've achieved for similar sorts of shows, as well as what sort of behaviour they're seeing in their local market. Take a look at the town's population and demographics. We have had applicants estimate audiences equivalent to the entire population of a town. So, yes, every single person in the town might come to see your show, but how likely is that? Or people estimating numbers of attendees from schools when the schools they've made their assumption of attendance from school students based on schools in Brisbane, not schools out in rural communities, which often have a far less enrolments than a city school. Having a marketing plan that understands the audiences for your work and how to reach them, and having enough time in your project plan and enough money in your budget to reach them will also help to de-risk the money in your application. And of course, looking for ways to spread and diversify your income mix by either applying for other grants or sponsorship, or thinking about how you can add value through other activities like workshops or masterclasses. So again, it needs to be relevant for your budget, but there are a few of the things that actually in presenting a good application is also is already helping you to reduce your own risk. Okay. So what I've done here is I've just taken a snip out of the online application form to talk to you about budgets, and hopefully this will make some of the theory a little bit clearer. So in the budget, the tour that I'm budgeting for has a show that originates in Townsville, but it's going to Cairns, to Hughenden, and to Charters Towers. The cast and crew will rehearse for a week and then tour for a week. The venue in Cairns is being hired, and I'm going to have to pay staff costs on top of my venue hire fee, but I will take 100% of the box office. In Hughenden, the venue is being provided in kind, and I'm going to take the box office. And in Charters Towers, I'm being paid a fee to perform. I've been able to convince a local car hire business to sponsor my tour, and they're going to be providing me with free hire of a people carrier and trailer. So first things first, I do my expenditure first. The amount column, so that's the central column, is the total cost of the item. And you can see in the item description column that I put in enough details that people can follow my calculations. And it's easy to see how many of a thing there is and what that item costs. So artist fees, 3 people, 2 weeks at at 1,600 for one week rehearsal and 1 tour. Per diems, 7 days for 3 people, $80 per day. I've also added some information so that peers can see if there's a relevant piece of supporting material. Cairns venue charges, see quote. Hughenden Tech, see quote. You can see here in this budget that I've put a line in for petrol, again with calculations. I've included that my petrol assumptions are based on a price per litre of $2.20. At the moment where I am, it's about $2 per litre, so peers will be able to see that I've included a reasonable contingency within the unit price against a potential price rise. But you can see that I didn't put the cost of the transport hire into the expenditure. This is because it's in kind and it will go into the in kind section. As part of my supporting material from presenting partners, I'll include a quote from my Cairns venue for the hire fee of a small theatre that also confirms that my dates are being held. That's my confirmation from one of my locations, as well as venue hire. So the venue hire fee, as well as any estimated technical and front of house charges. Hughenden doesn't have a tech, so I'm going to have to pay for a tech to come out to Hughenden. There's people nodding because they've been to Hughenden.
Correct.
It's almost like I used to run this fund. Okay. So I put in my expenditure. Now I'm going to fill in my income. This includes any cash that I'm going to receive as part of the tour. So you can see here that I've separated out the income from my 3 locations, and I've added some details about my calculations. I've also added some income from some drama workshops that I'm going to provide to school students in Hughenden. I've also stated whether the income is confirmed or not. Obviously, the tickets aren't sold yet, so they are not confirmed, but my fee from Charters Towers is. And I've included a letter from them in my supporting material saying they're interested in booking the show for this amount if I'm successful in my grant application. So that's my confirmation of my second of my 2 venues. I haven't added the sponsorship of the van because I'm not receiving that as cash income. It's being provided for free, and so it's going into the in-kind section. Can you tell that people have a lot of problems with in-kind? I'm also going to attach a spreadsheet as part of my supporting material that shows my ticketing assumptions. For example, what percentage of the available seats that I think I'll sell, and the proportion of adults versus concessions, which gives me my average ticket price. In the spreadsheet, I'm also going to include a note that says I discussed with Cairns, and they say that they get an average audience for my type of show of between 200 and 220. So I've estimated at the lower end to be safe. And I've also noted that when I visited a Hughenden in the past, I've sold an average of 110 tickets. So I've been a little bit conservative in my estimates there. Again, you're providing some certainty to the peers that you know what you're doing and that you'll be able to achieve what you've set out to achieve. In-kind. Now we're on to the in-kind slide. So in this section, I've added the venue hire from Hughenden that I'm getting in-kind for free, and also the value of the sponsorship covering the van hire. And in my supporting material, I'm providing that letter from the Hughenden venue saying they've got my dates and that they'll commit this amount. They'll give me the venue hire for free, and they're really excited to see my show. And you can also, I'll also have that letter confirming from my sponsor that they're going to give me a van for a week and the value of that hire. Okay. So now the form has totaled my expenditure up and my income up. And it's taken the cash expenditure and it's added the in-kind component to it, to both the expenditure and the income. And the income, sorry, the expenditure minus the income tells me what is my gap. What money do I need to be able to deliver my tour on a balanced budget? And that is your Arts Queensland funding request. In the bad old days, people used to put in how much money they wanted to ask Arts Queensland Fund and then tried to build their budgets around it. In this way, your budget will always balance because you're only asking Arts Queensland for the difference between what you're spending and what you're getting from other sources. Also, in the form, you can see the percentage of income that's being requested from Arts Queensland. That's lower than 50, which is the eligibility criteria. It must be 50% or less from Arts Queensland. If that number doesn't work for you, we also give it to you of the non-Arts Queensland funding, so it's the 51.8. So whichever number makes more sense for your brain. In both instances, you can see that you've met your eligibility criteria of no more than 50% contribution by Arts Queensland. And as I said, and because it's looking at the cash and the in-kind, that's the figure that it's giving you. It's not just looking at cash income, it's looking at in-kind as well as cash. Okay, so that's my funding request. The next thing I need to go is I go back to my expenditure and I need to go about allocating my $12,942 across eligible costs. And I put this in the AQ contribution amount column. So this number is a subset of this number. It cannot be higher than this number. And again, because this is the amount of this money that you're asking for from Arts Queensland. So first line, artist fees. Arts Queensland won't pay for rehearsals. And one of my weeks, I've got 1 week of rehearsals and 1 week of tour. So I could only allocate 1 week of my artist and stage manager to Arts Queensland funding. There's my 480 and my 150, half of their fees. However, travel allowances, per diems are eligible costs, as are accommodation, fuel and equipment hire. So I'm going to allocate funding to them. So at the moment, I've just put the exact figures of all of those. 100% of those costs I've allocated to Arts Queensland. But now that I've done that, if I go back to my budget columns, I've allocated more money than I'm actually receiving. And it tells me how much extra that I've allocated. I've allocated 1,600 too much. So I've got to go and reduce one of those numbers in my expenditure section by 1,600. So I'm going to take it out of the equipment hire cost. And voila, I have a balanced budget. And now it will let me submit it. Okay, almost at the end. So top tips for submitting an application: start early. Your tour planning will probably start months before even the application even opens, so that you have a good idea of who your presenters will be and what fees or box office arrangements that you'll have. Once the grant's open, give yourself enough time to plan, write and refine. Strong applications usually go through multiple drafts, and starting early lets you gather the relevant support material and letters without being in a rush, and refine your budget and narrative and timeline so they align with each other. Rushed applications often read as unclear or incomplete. Clearly articulate the why of the project, as well as demonstrating a demand for your work and a clear case for need. So as I said before, why this project for these communities? How does it align with the Queensland's time to shine, for example, sharing a Queensland story or giving access to regional Queenslanders? Will it create employment opportunities or skills? How does it fit with your longer term goals? Why does this project require funding to happen? It's expensive to tour. Maybe you've got a really big cast and it's just not affordable otherwise. And what barriers exist for audiences without the support of Arts Queensland's funding? Use plain and clear language. Be direct. What are you doing? How and why? Imagine that you're explaining it to your grandmother or a bloke in the pub. The artier or more academic language you use, the harder it is for anybody to really truly understand what it is that you're doing in your project. And don't assume that assessors are familiar with you or your work. To be fair to everybody, they are assessing what's on the page, what they're seeing in the application, so that Queensland Ballet would have the same theoretical chance as a local dance company. Queensland Ballet is not eligible for this fund, but you know what I mean. Don't rest on a reputation. We've seen people do that before and not include things that they just assume assessors will know about them and they haven't been successful because other people have done the work and put it in. Provide evidence of your past work or experience, so reviews, images, other documentation, and as we've discussed, your CV should be demonstrating that the people involved have the right skills for this particular project. And if you are a great artist and you've never toured before, tell us about who's supporting you on this journey. How are you being supported to be able to deliver this if this isn't the skill set that you already have? Please reference outcomes that you've previously achieved and keep all of your support material relevant and high quality. Include meaningful community engagement where possible. So having community engagement demonstrates broader value and impact for Arts Queensland investment, making the most of the money it costs to get you to those communities that you're going to. But the important word here is meaningful. If it's not meaningful, then don't do it, because chances are, if you're doing something that you haven't thought about or that nobody wants, when it comes to outcome reporting, you're not going to be able to achieve the KPIs that have been set based on what you said you're going to do. We absolutely recognise that different tours have different capacity for community engagement. So a live music tour with a band playing in a different pub every night is not going to have as much time to do community engagement as somebody who's doing a slow touring model. Talk to your presenting partners or your community contact about what's wanted and needed in that community. Again, it's about demonstrating need and demand. Be creative in what you're thinking about doing and consider accessibility and inclusion when you're designing your community engagement activities. Some really lovely examples from past tours have included having a barbecue hosted by the local Lions Club before a show, where the audience could chat to the performers. And especially when people were traveling from out of town into a rural location, it made a big night of it and really built the atmosphere for the show. We've had people running shadow puppet and storytelling workshops for a mums group alongside a children's show to give them more confidence in doing story time for their own kids. Another great example is taking duos from a chamber group into old people's homes and schools for mini concerts and giving master classes to local artists and teachers. So again, there's a lot of different things and Q-Touring will definitely be able to help you with some ideas, but it should be meaningful for you, meaningful for the project, and meaningful for that community. I know I've been banging on about it, but ensure the project description matches the project timeline and the budget. Consistency is critical. Avoid vague or missing steps. If it's too high level, again, you're not giving the assessors the confidence that you actually know what you're doing and you're going to be able to deliver it. Please, please, please include all relevant supporting material, especially all compulsory supporting material. So we've talked about the compulsory support material before, but in terms of top tips, make sure all the links are working and accessible so that they're not password protected or they don't require a login. Have someone else who isn't you test the links before submitting, just in case you've got some things, some buried passwords or automatic logins that other people don't have. Applications have failed because peers could not open links to see what the touring work was, and therefore they couldn't assess the quality. And in terms of supporting material, demonstrate that that partner is robustly supporting the project, including any financial in-kind contributions. Support information that's in someone's own words is far more powerful than a template letter. Ensure letters are on date, on letterhead, relevant to the project, and that quotes are recent. And if it's easier or more powerful, have people put a video in. That's absolutely acceptable as a piece of support material or a letter of support, and can be far more compelling and powerful than a letter that's written on a piece of paper that's exactly the same as the letter from the other community. Ask a peer or mentor or a friend to review your application before submitting. Ask them if the project's clear, check for any gaps or inconsistencies or jargon. Ideally, get feedback from somebody inside, but also somebody outside your discipline, because if they don't understand it, maybe the assessors won't either. And finally, if you're going to use AI, use it to sharpen your writing or give you a guide on structure. Don't use it to generate content. It's very easy for assessors to see applications that are generated by AI. They have generic statements that use words from the guidelines or from Queensland Time to Shine strategy, but they don't connect things in a specific way. As I said before, part of what you're doing is convincing peers that you know what you're doing and that the project will be delivered successfully. When they see 3 identical marketing plans come up in the same round, it doesn't really give peers confidence that you actually understand what's needed or will follow through or deliver on it. So they were the questions that I was given. I hope that I've covered them all through this presentation. If not, I'm happy to provide, I guess, some further updates for individuals, or they can give us a call. Finally, our timeline for the Touring Queensland Fund, it opens on the 31st of August. You need to submit by the 12th of October. At the moment, it says the 2nd of October. It's a typo on the website. It is the 12th of October. You've got 1 more week, hooray. And the submission deadline is 2 p.m, not midnight, 2 p.m. That way, if there's any problems with IT, then we can get it resolved before the end of the day. We do not consider it an acceptable reason to submit a late application because you've got the dates wrong and or the time wrong. Read the dates. It's 2 p.m, Monday, 12th of October. We'll notify people by the middle of December, and it's for activity happening after the 28th of February. And activity would need to be completed by the 31st of December 2028. So the final slide is there's the link to the funding page. As I said, on Monday, it'll go live with some more dates. It's pretty much the same as it was last round. There's only some tiny tweaks in some of the wording. Obviously, the lovely people at Touring have a website with lots of wonderful resources. You can also go to the Regional Arts Services Network. They provide art form specific advice, so please reach out to them. I've included also a fantastic article that I read in Arts Hub, which is about it's written by a grant assessor, and it's just such a good insight into what grant assessors are looking for, and it really just encapsulates everything that we tell people about. So yeah, it's behind a paywall, I think, if you're not an Arts Hub applicant, but maybe Ruth, if you guys are Arts Hub members, you could copy it and send it around.
Yeah, we certainly can. Yes.
Okay, well, that's me.
Thank you, Toma. Jacob and Jennifer, have you got any specific questions that you want to just clarify with Toma?
Well, thanks so much, Toma. That is super helpful. Wow.
Yay. Oh, I hope so. And we really love to talk to people. So we would much prefer that people call us in advance of the application to chat through any sort of woolly or we can't tell you what to put in your application or what to decide to do, but we can tell you what makes a strong application. We can certainly advise you on eligibility. We'd much rather do that than have a horrible conversation with you telling you you're ineligible and you cry and like.
Thank you. No, very appreciative. I just had a question on you said that we can use the funds for community engagement. So with our shows, we offer like workshops that connect with our show. So we can use the funds to like cover the materials of the workshop and the cost of that workshop. So it's complementary to the community.
Yeah, I mean, just put why you're giving it away for free, like have a rationale for why why you know that this is the best way to engage with audiences.
Cool.
Giving something free rather than a small charge, just include something about that. But yes, it could defray the cost of delivering those by putting it all. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. That's entirely reasonable.
Thank you.
I had oh, you go, Jacob.
Are you sure? Thank you. I appreciate. I have a little question, and I think I know the answer already, actually, because you've been so clear. But here's my question, and you tell me the answer, which I think you would tell me. It's by my experience of touring regionally that actually a lot of their venues are just humongous. They're massive. There's 800, 1,000 seats. But the work that I'm making whilst in Brisbane for a smaller venue size, I think sits really well in a regional setting.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that I think our set in Brisbane works quite well, but our set regionally needs to expand.
Yeah. Okay.
And in the kind of framing of like tour ready, we, our show is tour ready, but I suspect that actually in order to fit in an 800 seater, we would have to expand our set a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that fundable? I suspect not.
No, not really. Although, are there things you need to hire rather than things you would own? So see if there are things that can be part of, hire of equipment. But yeah, I suspect that's going to just have to be covered by extra cash from somewhere else. Yeah.
That makes total sense to me. In your articulation before, I'm like, okay, good to know. Can I be cheeky?
Yeah, totally.
And ask for a little bit of elaboration on potentially how like a touring in schools model would do the 50%? Because I kind of understand how a presenter model where I'm going to a venue who's bought some aspect of the show could get me to that 50%. And I think schools have some capacity to do that, but probably not the capacity that a presenter does.
Well, it's real. A show that works in a venue is not the same or the right show to tour into school. So I ran, as I said, the school's touring program. The most people that we toured were 3 performers and 1 stage manager. It was usually a 2-hander, sometimes a 2-hander with a tech. Like, you really have to think about, most schools, especially as you go out regionally, don't have stages. You're performing in the hall. If you're lucky, that hall is indoors and not outdoors, and you're able to achieve a blackout. So it's the type of things that you would do in a venue are more expensive. The type of things that you would do in a school probably needs to be a lot lighter and more nimble. So schools do and do pay. They quite often pay either by the student or a minimum fee. So, for example, when we had the school's touring program, we had, I think, this is many years ago now, so the numbers aren't quite right, but we had, I think, an $800 minimum charge for a school, and that got you up to 100 students. And then if you had more than 100 students, you paid like an extra $6 per student. So touring to schools is only really viable, I think, if you've got a mix of some bigger regional towns, so where you could maybe do 3 schools in a day or 2 schools in a day and spend a week doing multiple shows, and then going out a bit further out. So because really the most you can do most places is a show a day, because you've got travel and then a show. Sometimes it's a show every 2 days if you get out fully remote. So that's, I guess, where our investment would play a role, is making that bit more viable for schools. So schools can pay, independent schools can pay more than state schools, but I would really have some good hard conversations with teacher friends, if you have any, about if this fits the curriculum. It is a real challenge going into schools, because they've also got gatekeepers. There's not usually, unless you've got a connection with the drama teacher or the music teacher or things like that, things that go to the principal, which is the general email, just can get lost. So it's the people who do it in Queensland tend to concentrate on it and make that sort of, I guess, their bread and butter. But I'm not sure. So we've been funding some regional and remote touring through Shake and Stir, and they have been working with artists based regionally, but that's coming to an end, and there should be an announcement soon about what's happening next. So I can't, otherwise say, go talk to them, because they might be able to do something, but they may not be able to. But yeah, it is if you are interested in schools touring, I'd really recommend start local first and see if you can are you Brisbane based?
Yes.
Okay, see what you can you get a week or 2 weeks out of like doing a show in schools in Brisbane, and get that teacher feedback, get the testimonials, and that will just help you to be able to spill out further. Sorry, Ruth, I'm probably stealing your advice.
No, that's perfectly fine. Actually, one of the things that I was going to ask about was the arts book, but that sort of helps, because I know that they've got funding, but then you can apply to Touring Queensland to also support that kind of probably a mixed tour. Can you do a community engagement tour and not have a performance?
Absolutely. So our lovely ironing ladies, ironing maidens.
Yes, ironing maiden. Yes.
So they've done workshop and residency tours where they've gone into a community for a week, and they've just delivered electronic music workshops, some for schools, some for other people, and that was their tour model. So you don't have to do a performance. People, we've funded fairly recently somebody who is going to be touring memoir writing workshops. So they're going to be working in different communities, teaching people how to turn their own personal stories into memoirs. So absolutely, a tour of just workshops is also.
And do you still need the 50% on that if it's just community engagement as well? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Everybody needs the 50%.
Have you had I do a lot of work up in the Cape with my other job. Have you had many success with funding for tours through the Cape? I just know it's trickier because there's not as many venues there, or as
So we have so under Grow, which is the last action plan, Grin and Tonic got sort of multi-year funding to deliver, I guess, slow touring model in the Cape and Torres Strait Islander. So they would go and work in and with communities. It is a bit harder to do, and roads, and there's definitely a time of year that you do it, and not other times of the year. But I would say it's an underserved area. And that's where.
Sorry, I think you also said very early on in your presentation that you understand like travel days might need to be supported, for artists touring in that way.
Yeah, and that's why we support artists' fees, is because you can't. It's very hard to make it work financially, especially given a lot of those very remote communities are not wealthy communities. And I guess that would be a really good example of where you would need to have some sort of support from an elder or a community leader in those saying we want what's coming, and we've talked to them, we're excited, we're interested to do it, because it's just doing something, we're going to go there and people will love it, is not not appropriate.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely. And can you apply for, so we have our live show, but we also do visual arts installation based stuff, which is better for probably going to more regional areas like that. So could we apply for 2 consecutive grants, or you can only put 1 application in?
You can only put 1 application per round. You can only be successful in 1 consecutive grant, but you can apply for a program of touring. So if you want to go, well, actually, we're going to do a performance. I mean, the money has to stack up. It's only $100,000. So but in theory, you could go, well, actually, our program of tours is we're going to do a performance tour, and then we're going to go back 6 months later with our visual arts installation tour and build on those relationships with the communities and pop that one into a program of tours over the course of a year. And that would also be fine.
Awesome. Sorry for spamming.
It's all right.
So, any more questions, or I can wrap up?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
What I got most of all is to start early, and because it opens very soon on the 31st.
I've written that down 3 times.
we are here to help. So the Q Touring producer Nigel, our First Nations producer Natalie, and myself, we're all available to give you any advice about touring. We're connected with all the presenters, what's in their venues, what the logistics are. We know about the LPA award, travel and accom in regional places. So any of those questions we can help with. Might even have some examples of evaluations and risk management and audience development plans, things like that we can help with.
Thanks,
Natalie
Ruth.
is also really good to talk about protocols and advice if you're planning to engage with Indigenous communities. And of course, she supports any First Nations artists that are planning to tour as well. So there is a way to make a meeting with us. If you haven't already, I think both of you have made a meeting before, but you can make a meeting with us at hello@touring.com.au and chat to us anytime in the lead up to submissions, but I'd suggest starting early. If look, please thank Toma, because that was an amazing presentation, and it was
too much.
Well, it was a lot, but it was really good to have, and even I, I think I know everything, but I didn't. I learned something from you, so I've written multiple notes as well. So I think it's really important to refresh every now and then and make sure that each application is different, and then each funding round is there's little tweaks to it that you can do. So thank you so much for your information. Thank you for joining us tonight too.
That's all right.
And with that, I will say have a really lovely evening, everyone. Thank you everyone for joining. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.